What's going on, guys? Carmine here, and welcome back to the non-stop Season 8 hype train. Now that the first episode is out, it's time to look back a little and see if we can spot some of the most interesting tidbits and Easter eggs that made a ton of callbacks for earlier seasons, and even some new stuff as well. As usual, on the first viewing, anybody can miss them, but I've seen the first episode of Season 8 about 3 times now, for YouTube purposes, of course, and here are some of the things I've noticed that you might have missed. And as always, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button for more. If you're not new to the channel, then guys, please hit that bell button, please, so you can get notified when all my videos are released, because Lord knows YouTube loves not notifying you guys when I do release something. But let's get to it. Now, the first thing you might have noticed was in the opening credits, they completely changed the locations a bit and gave us a nice clear shot of the interior of Winterfell and King's Landing. This was done to fill in the time for the opening due to the fact that there aren't that many locations left where our story could take place, considering all of our main and some secondary characters have converged on Winterfell. Another thing to note is that the path of the Night King's army is highlighted by blue tiles flipping over. But if you notice, the astrolabe that previously told the story of the Doom of Valyria, Robert's Rebellion, and the crowning of House Baratheon tells a different story now. The first time we see it, it tells of the Night King's dragon burning down the wall. The second time gives us the Red Wedding, the Stark Wolf hanging from the Towers of the Twins, which is House Frey's sigil, while the Flayed Man, House Bolton's sigil, holds up another wolf's head, which is supposed to be Robb Stark, and to the left, the Lannister lion holding a fish in its jaws, the fish being House Tully, while the last blade shows us the birth of Dany's dragons, with the red comet in the background. And one thing I did notice about this is that the story on the astrolabe is going backwards, whereas the previous story in past seasons' opening credits went forward. It's a bit interesting because this may be the show hinting at something, and if you're curious as to what, I have a whole video on it. I released it yesterday. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're curious. The video is called "The Game of Thrones Just Spoil Its Own Ending." Check it out. Now, I'm sure the obvious thing you've noticed in the beginning of the episode is how it mirrors the arrival of King Robert Baratheon and his entourage back in the first episode of Season 1. But what you probably didn't notice is that there are multiple things from both episodes that also mirror each other, such as Arya noticing the Hound who, if you want to get a little deep, isn't coming in with his helmet on, which means he's no longer a dog for the Lannisters, but his own man. When Jon first greets Bran, it's with a kiss on the forehead, which is the exact way he left Bran back in Season 1, Episode 2, when Bran was in a coma. When Dany arrives in Winterfell, Sansa says to her, "Winterfell is yours, your grace," which is the same thing Ned Stark said to Robert Baratheon. Once again, if you want to get a little deep on this, it could signal that Sansa is the true leader of Winterfell by the laws of Game of Thrones callbacks, which is technically true since Jon, as we find out later, is the rightful king of Westeros. And on the topic of callbacks, foreshadowing, and Robert, back in Season 1 in the Crypts of Winterfell, Robert tells Ned that they should join houses, that he has a son, Ned has a daughter, and in this episode, the show teases us a possible romance between Robert's son and Ned's daughter. This could be a bit of fan service, but I'll let you be the judge on that one. And on the topic of Arya, the drawing she hands Gendry looks to be a staff with a dragonglass attachment. At first, I thought it was a dagger or something, but Arya just kinda sucks at drawing. It does look like she'll be able to detach this into either a dagger or a short sword. I can't really tell, but what is clear is that the main design is a staff, which is something she used during her Faceless Men training with the Waif. When Jon and Arya first reunite again, they embrace in the same way they did when they first left each other. And speaking of Jon Snow, his parentage is littered throughout the entire episode, with him riding the dragon, named after his father, and even learning of his real mother with her statue in the background. However, even though Sam is the one to deliver this truth to him, Ned still kept his promise somewhat. When we last saw these two together, Ned told him that the next time they see each other, they'll talk about Jon's mother, and though he's been dead for quite some time, Ned did keep his promise in some form. You can also argue that Jon learns the truth in the presence of all his family, Ned, Lyanna, and Samwell, who he regards as a brother either through the Night's Watch or otherwise. Over in King's Landing, someone pointed out a nice foreshadowing in this shot here of Cersei when she stops to look back at Euron. The show is very good at foreshadowing, as we know, so could this be how Cersei dies? By dragonfire? In the next scene, we do see that Euron and Cersei have slept together, though if you notice, she's drinking again. This could give us a big hint as to one of two things. Either she miscarried, which was one of the leaks from Season 7 that never came to fruition, or had the child aborted. For those of you who don't know, in the books, it is possible for women in Westeros to drink something called moon tea to trigger the loss of child. And it's also entirely possible that she's done this after Jaime leaves her, especially considering how she has Qyburn give Bronn the crossbow to finish off her two brothers, the same way Tyrion killed Tywin. And speaking of Bronn, he starts out by almost having a threesome at the beginning of his scene, which is a callback to Season 1, with Tyrion's very first scene ending with him having a threesome. And last, we head on over to Last Heart at the very end of the episode where Ned Umber is brutally killed. However, I'm sure by now you've probably seen everyone and their mothers mentioning how it's the same symbol from previous seasons, blah 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 blah, and even saying at one point the symbol kind of looks a little Targaryen-ish, like the Targaryen symbol. Well, yeah, but did you also know that this mirrors exactly what happens in the very first episode of Game of Thrones? In the very first episode, when we open up, the Night's Watch members are ranging beyond the wall until they encounter a similar scene with a little girl killed in the very same fashion that Ned Umber is. She even reanimates later like he does. Not to mention, everything is kind of reversed. In the first episode, they are beyond the wall, encountering dead wildlings, led by a member of the Night's Watch, while this time around it's on the other side of the wall, led by Tormund, who is a wildling, in Westerosi territory, with members of House Umber killed, while a boy reanimates instead. And of course, the very last scene of this episode is a callback to how the first one ended with Jaime and Bran. But guys, that is it for now, and yes, I know, I didn't mention a few other things, but I felt like a lot of it was stuff you already caught yourself, such as the Dany Ygritte line about staying in the cave or the waterfalls forever, and the parallels between Dany and Cersei in the first episode. In episode 1, Dany felt very alone despite being surrounded by a large group of people, and now Cersei feels incredibly alone despite being surrounded by a large group of people. Small tidbits like that, but let me know if you caught something I didn't mention, or if I caught you by surprise with any of these. As always, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, ring that bell to stay notified, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.